If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may.
Welcome to another episode of The School Without Walls. I am the founder and host, Antonio Hobbs. My guest today is Mr. Lonza C. Hardy, Jr., the athletic director of the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. We're really glad to have you here with us today.
Glad to be here.
Before we get into conversation, I always like to sort of remind the public what I'm all about, what the program is all about. The program is really about doing whatever we can to elevate the African American community educationally, spiritually, and economically. And there are processes to do this, and one thing is mentoring. We stress mentoring, and I encourage all the ministers, I'll speak directly to the ministers, we encourage the ministers, all ministers, please come on board and have your parishioners of good character to try to save the lives of some young African American boy who doesn't have a father figure in his home, and we have so many of those today. That's what we're basically all about, and there are other things we talk about from time to time, but mentoring is key. Would you agree?
I definitely agree.
Good, good. Okay, what I'd like for you to do, tell us about your background. You were not born here in the state, I don't think, were you?
I was not.
I think I remember when you were hired here. So let's go back to the beginning. Your parents, father and mother, and then come forward. Grandfather, if you want to. Just go back as far as you want to.
The majority of my family is rooted in the state of North Carolina.
North Carolina?
Right.
Okay.
I was actually, my parents were both born in a little town called Pleasant Hill, North Carolina, which is right at the Virginia border. However, before I was born, my mother and father had both moved to New York City. And I was born in New York City in Harlem. My mother still lives a block away from Harlem Hospital where I was born at. And at the age of 4, however, my parents separated and my sisters and I moved to North Carolina where we grew up with our grandparents.
Went back where your parents were born.
Right.
That's amazing.
Matter of fact, back in the city where both my parents were born, and I grew up in North Carolina, went to school in North Carolina. I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I got a degree in journalism.
Okay.
And shortly after graduation, I've been real fortunate in my lifetime. I started my first job the morning after commencement.
Is that right?
And have worked continuously since then.
There you are blessed.
Yep.
So
and
many people have not
It
done
just
that.
happened that my first job was on the campus of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where I spearheaded a journalism program for high school students.
I see. You was working for the college,
Right.
but you were high school students was the focus.
Right. Matter of fact, it was a group of minority high school students that we were trying to get them interested in going into the field of journalism.
Okay. Now let me ask you a question about that term minority. I think that can be kind of misleading. Now, minority to me would be more than blacks.
Right.
You not only work with blacks, but other non-white people, right?
Right.
Good. What were some of the other ethnic people?
Well, it was a small program. I think we may have had maybe 16 high school students. The majority of those were African American men and women. I think we did have a couple of Latinos also in the group.
Okay. Was that area pretty well populated with Latinos when you were?
When I was growing up, it was not close to what it is now. It was a very small minority.
But now quite a few there, right? They're really growing all over the nation, with special emphasis, seemed to me, in southern states and then northern cities. Seem like they're more in the metropolitan area in the big cities, right?
Right. Where I was born, even in Harlem now, I remember even after my siblings and I had moved to North Carolina, when we would go back to New York to visit our parents, especially our mother who lived in Harlem, it was almost probably 98% African American. Now, increasingly, you see the diversity in Harlem.
And a lot of Latinos, right?
Yeah, a lot of Latinos.
Various nations, Puerto Ricans.
Even on the block where my mother lives at now, there's an increasing number of Caucasians that are actually moving into Harlem.
They're moving into Harlem now.
Yes.
Isn't that's amazing? Just for the educational aspect of our program, and when you said Latinos, many nations could be represented there, right? Like
Right.
Puerto Ricans are
Yes.
considered as Latinos, and we have Mexicans, we have people from the various nations in South America. After the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about that because it's educational, and I know that a lot of people do not know what Latino, Hispanic means. So we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Wake the sun, tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Try and avoid sneezing into your hand because you just contaminate them and then spread those germs everywhere. Focus on sneezing into your elbow, like this, and then you don't contaminate your hands. Turn on the water, wet your hands, apply a good amount of soap and lather up, and then focus on washing your hands for about 20 seconds, about the time it takes to sing Happy Birthday twice. Focus on washing the front of your hands, the back, in between the fingers, around the nails, and so on. And then rinse everything off. Use something to wipe your hands after that, preferably something disposable like a paper towel, and then use that to turn off the tap as well. If you get a chance, use that to also open the door to the bathroom as you're leaving. The best way to wash your hands is using running water and soap, but sometimes we don't have that available. So think about carrying with you a hand sanitizer. That should have at least 60% alcohol content.
For more information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host of this educational program called The School Without Walls. My guest is Mr. Lonza C. Hardy, Jr., the Director of Athletics here at the University of Arkansas, and he's an ideal role model because we are specifically presenting African American males as local role models. Trying to break that habit of African Americans have to go to New York or Chicago to find an athlete or something to be a role model. We have role models all around us. Okay, briefly, I want to say to the public that we were talking about Latinos. Latinos and Hispanics is kind of confusing to the person who's not academically grounded in that definition. Well, when we say Latino, we're talking about all of the persons that speak a language that derives from Latin. But mostly we think about Spanish. We think most about Spanish, don't we?
Most people do.
Yeah, but see, Latinos, if you're going to go to that route, the Portuguese would be Latinos too because Portuguese derives from Latin, you see?
Yep.
Italians would be that too, but we generally say Italians, we would say maybe Portuguese and Latinos due to the lack of knowledge. And when we say Hispanic, we're talking about peoples whose mother tongue is Spanish and they weren't born in Spain. Those who are born in Spain are called Spaniards. And sometimes people are insulted because of the lack of knowledge of the person. Might say, "Are you Spanish?" And he's Mexican. So he's not Spanish, you know. Right. I'm Mexican. If you're Mexican, aren't you Spanish? No. You have to be born in Spain to be considered as a Spaniard, and the majority of people who speak Spanish have never seen Spain. Yeah, we have Mexico, we have about 10 or 11 nations in South America that speak Spanish. Central America, about 6 nations that speak Spanish. So a lot of people speak Spanish, and all of those people are referred to as Hispanics. rather than say a Cuban, a Mexican, just say Hispanics. There were a lot of Hispanics there. They don't know whether the man was Cuban, Puerto Rican, because they're all mixed. And that's what you meant when you said a lot of Hispanics that come in, right?
Right.
All of them are not of one nation. Some are Puerto Ricans, I imagine.
Yes.
You might have a few Cubans, and you might have some from any Hispanic. Now back to Mr. Hardy. All right, your first job was in the University of North Carolina, was it?
Yes.
And where did you move? Just tell us what the next jobs and progressing.
Yes. After I finished North Carolina, I had the summer journalism seminar for high school students on the campus of North Carolina Chapel Hill. Then my first full-time job, it came out of the clear blue sky when I was matriculating in North Carolina. Being a journalism student, I worked with one of the campus newspapers initially as a sports writer, then sports editor, ultimately editor-in-chief. So when there was a small school out of Albany, Georgia, Albany State College at the time, which is now Albany State University, they called a placement office at the School of Journalism because knowing the reputation of the school, they were looking for a sports information director.
Did they have a good journalism program?
Usually in this country, when you speak of great journalism programs nationally, you're looking at one of three schools, essentially. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, University of Missouri, and University of Florida, where our new chancellor just came from.
Okay.
Those are usually
three.
the most recognized schools of journalism.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Okay.
So Albany State, knowing the reputation and being a small HBCU school in Georgia, they called the School of Journalism and said, we have an opening for a sports information director. And unfortunately, they referred my name to that gentleman, and the gentleman called me one day out of the clear blue sky and basically offered me the job on the spot, not having spoken with me. So my only question to the gentleman, I said, well, at least I would like to come to your campus and see your campus. Thank you for offering the job to me. So they flew me down, wine and dine me. I accepted the job at the Albany State College, where I worked for a year and a half as a public information aide, but I concentrated mainly on media relations for the sports programs.
I see.
And after working at Albany State, which is a Division II school, for the year and a half, the similar job became open at Alcorn State University in Mississippi, where they were looking for a sports information director. So I interviewed for that position and got the job, worked at Alcorn State for 6 years. Ultimately, my athletics director at Alcorn became the athletics director at Southern University in Baton Rouge. So upon getting that job, he offered me the position at Southern in Baton Rouge, which I accepted. I stayed there for 3 years.
Now, what were you doing at that job? He offered you
sports information director.
Right. For 3 years.
Right.
Now, what was the difference in that job and the one you came from? Seemed like they were both the same, weren't they?
Right. The jobs at Alcorn and Southern were both the same. The job at Albany State, I worked in the public relations office, even though 90% of my job duties was in the realm of publicizing the college's athletics program.
I see. Okay.
At Alcorn and at Southern, it was strictly just publicizing, handling the media relations for the athletics team.
I see. We have 1 minute, and it'll be break time. When we come back, we will continue talking about that. But let us not forget that 50 years ago, what happened? What's going on now that was 50 years ago that's significant?
And I hope all of our students know that the March on Washington.
The March on Washington, and then the key personality was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, right?
Yes.
So when we come back, let's talk a little bit about that. Were you old enough to remember that?
I did not remember the march, but one thing I will say, when I was matriculating in North Carolina, I did get an opportunity to meet one of his close compatriots.
Let's talk about that when we come back. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
What's up? This is my friend Rob from Michigan.
What's up?
He's a teenager.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Woo! Hey, you want to slow down there?
No.
Really? Oh, okay.
What are you doing?
We're shooting a viral video. Hold on, I want to see this. Hey, this is his last 5 minutes on Earth. A little something to Mom? Say something to Mom. How about, goodbye, Mom, sorry.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. That single ember can ignite and destroy your home or even your community. You can't control where the ember will land, only what happens when it does. Get Fire Adapted now at fireadapted.org.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program called The School Without Walls. I have a guest, outstanding role model, Mr. Lonza C. Hardy Jr., who's the director of athletics here at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. We were talking about the March on Washington 50 years ago, and you said you were 6 years old. You know you told your age, don't
Yes.
you? That's okay. You don't.
Hey, I'm proud of my age.
You know, one of my, I guess as the old folks say, long coast is memory. So I can remember back when I was 5, 6 years old. Like I remember when Pearl Harbor was attacked. I was 7 years old. I remember that. But you don't remember any talk about that great march in Washington when you were 6. Just don't remember, do you?
At 6 years old, not really.
Yeah, okay. Well, since that time, tell us about it. You were saying during the break that you met the Reverend Abernathy, who was the second man in command with Dr. King, right?
Yes. And one thing I would encourage college students to do while you're on a college campus, when they bring in speakers, partake in going to those events and meeting those individuals. You get a chance of meeting people that years from now you will, future generations will read about in the history books.
Very important.
When I was in college, I had one of the organizations that I was, student organizations that I was affiliated with. We brought Ralph David Abernathy to speak on campus, and we also brought Julian Bond to speak on campus. And both of those gentlemen I had an opportunity to meet and talk about, and it's through those gentlemen that I was able to get a live account of the civil rights era and the struggles that they had, paving the way for me as an African American to attend a school like the University of North Carolina, which when King spoke on the University of North Carolina campus, there were not many people like me on the campus. But thanks to the March on Washington, Martin Luther King, Ralph David Abernathy, Julian Bond, they paved the way for me to attend a school like that.
That is really amazing. Very good information. I don't know whether Randy told you or not, when you want to speak to the audience, this is your camera right here.
Okay.
So I do want you to speak more to the young people, because we have serious problems as a race. Even today, we've made a lot of progress, and we've digressed in some areas. And I just want to know what you think about this. A large part of that is immorality, I think. You know, the killing and the stealing. Nobody grows up, I don't believe, that say, you know, my goal is to grow up and be a thief, a murderer, and a killer. Somebody has failed the child. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
I was reading something on the internet, I think on Monday. It was a piece talking about the Klan, the KKK, and how I think it was kind of a joke, but I think it's really was reality, how we have put the KKK out of business.
Oh, yeah.
The things that the KKK used to do to destroy our race, we are now doing it to ourselves.
We don't have to worry about it, do they?
No,
We're doing it. Our own people are doing it.
And that's unfortunate. And so I'm hoping that the young generation, or people that are in my shoes who are working on a college campus, or individuals that are working out in the public school system, K through 12, I hope they are really articulating to those kids what their parents and their grandparents had to go through, and to get them opportunities, and how they need to seize those opportunities rather than having crime against your own.
That is very well said, and we must be conscious that so many of young African males, American males, don't have a male image close to them. And we must step in the gap as black men. That's why I'm trying to get more mentors involved.
Right.
And I mentioned this on my other program, starting the third Wednesday in September, we're approaching September, the third Wednesday, I'm going to invite ministers. I'm going to ask the ministers to join me in a war against immorality among our young people, especially the male. And I'm going to just flood the screen with preachers. Hopefully they will be committed, because those are the ones who are charged with morals, not the police system, not the classroom, but it's the church.
Right. And when people commemorate the March on Washington today, and they look at the images of Martin Luther King, a lot of people refer to him as Dr. Martin Luther King. It's an important title. A lot of times people don't put on him. He was a reverend.
I've never heard it.
Reverend King.
I've never heard it. Have you? I have never heard.
Very seldom.
Heard him as Reverend King.
Martin Luther King was a minister. Ralph David Abernathy was a minister. The church, back in those times, they led the struggle for us to get the rights that we enjoy.
That's right.
Today.
It was the church. Andrew Young was a minister.
Yes.
Those are three of the top leaders of that group, weren't they?
Yes.
Andrew Young.
Right. And I understand from what
Reverend Jesse Jackson?
Yes, yes. What I have gathered, Al Sharpton.
Al Sharpton?
What I have gathered in my 2 years in the city of Pine Bluff is that there are over 300 African American churches in the city.
Right.
So I think it's incumbent upon the university as a higher education institution, and it's incumbent upon the clergy, which there are a lot of clergymen and women in the city, to really help to lead our young people and to get them out of the predicament that they're in now.
Well, that is what I'm all about, doing all I can to motivate that particular community. We have 1 second in this program, and I'm going to let you close it, but we will be back with the second part, since you have the time, okay? Because we have a lot to say. All right, what can you say? Speak through this camera and direct it to the young people, young men. What can you say to them?
What I can say to the young people, especially the young men, is that thanks to people like Martin Luther King and the people who marched on Washington 50 years ago, they sacrificed their lives, and Martin Luther King gave his life to give you opportunities. You just have to seize it. And what I would say to your parents and your grandparents and your aunts and your uncles and older relatives, they have to lead you. You don't have to go out on the street to find a leader. You can find a leader right in your homes. And the people just have to step forward to be the leaders for the young people that they need to be.
Well, thank you. So well said. We'll stop this segment of the program on those remarks. We'll be back for segment 2 in just a few minutes.